Hi. Hi, I'm Robert Joseph, and I am back with another pattern, and it's this guy right here. It's a brief pattern, very similar to my slim brief. As like that one, this one is also cut on the center front with a center front dart down below, higher cut legs, and then a little bit of a surprise in the back. So I've had some requests for some open rear patterns, and so this one has a open rear, and there's elastic that goes all the way around this, so you'll need to watch the video to see how that gets applied. I do want to mention that this pattern does not have a side seam, so this pattern is unique where it's just one piece, and again you're cutting the center front on the fold of the fabric. So depending on what size you're making, you could actually get a couple of pair of these out of a half yard of fabric, or even less than a yard, you might get a few. Of course, that depends on which size that you're making. So there is one little addition to this pattern as I'm trying to move forward with some newer things, offering some new things. And this pattern actually has sewing instructions that come with the pattern. So I know some of you don't like watching my hour-length videos. I do get talkative, but I do try to bring you as much information that I can while you're sewing along. I will mention that I do talk about elastics in this video, the elastics that I use and where I get them. Just be advised that I don't get sponsored by any of the companies that I mention. In fact, I don't get sponsored by any companies. It's just me. I'm it. Um, so this is kind of a fun pattern to do. Once you get used to doing this, of course, there are really only about 2-3 seams to this, with the exception of applying the elastic, which can be kind of challenging. I'll just give you a little bit of advice. Stick to it, just practice, and you'll get the hang of it. So without much more ado, let's get on with making this brief. Okay, so we're about to get started here, about to cut out the fabric. Now, a couple of things about the pattern. This is a one-piece pattern. Here you have the waist, and this here is going to be the leg strap, kind of like a jock strap. This is the opening for the rear, and this is the front pouch area. And we're going to be putting the upper part of the pouch on the fold. So also you may notice that I have handwritten notches here. I have castle notches here on the parts that go to the center back. So this will be sewn together, and these two will be sewn together. And then I have triangle notches here for the crotch area. So these will be sewn together this way. All right. Now they're handwritten on my pattern because I didn't realize it until just now that I did not put those on the pattern, and I figured those would probably be kind of helpful. So those will be on your pattern as the pattern is drawn. So I just wanted to get going with this tutorial so that I could get this pattern up for sale. Also, you want to make sure that you have all of your elastic measurements printed out. So when you cut everything out, you will have that available. Now, I did notice just one note about the elastics. For the show off, the rearless or backless show off video, I believe that is pattern number 27, because I just did the video for that. I adjusted the elastic amount because I felt like I reduced the elastic too much. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead with these elastic amounts, and we'll see how it goes on here. Now, I do sampling beforehand, and it seems to work with the way I do the sampling, but sometimes when I get into doing the videos, I decide that, maybe I shouldn't have made the elastic too small. So we'll see how it goes with this. And if I need to make adjustments, I will let you know at that time. And of course, that will already be adjusted on your end. Now, one thing to note is that you have 2 leg openings, so you'll need to cut 2 of these here, which will go around this area right here. And then you're going to cut 1 rear opening elastic that goes around this area. Also, for the elastics, where do I buy my elastics? In the video which is actually, I should have linked here. I think it's number 27. I can't remember. I've been doing a lot of videos this week. So for the show off, low-rise show off brief with the rear opening, I do a whole thing about the elastics and where I buy them. So the links will be below in the description for where I buy the elastics. And mostly I'm buying them at Waywalk or Wawak or however you pronounce it. I don't get paid by them to say this. That's where I buy a lot of my sewing stuff from. Now that Joann's has closed, I used to just run out there. Well, I don't run out either. I have two Joannes to choose from, and they're an hour in each direction, so it's not like I'm just running out. But when I would go there, I would always buy extra elastics. So I choose to use knitted elastic, and the amounts are on the pattern. The width for the leg opening and the back opening is 3/8 wide. And I use a sport elastic for the waist. It has kind of ribs on it, and it's very soft and pliable, so it's really gentle against the skin. And I use the 1.25-inch wide elastic for the waistbands. So, and I buy both of those from waywalk.com. Okay, and again, I don't get paid or sponsored by them to say that. That's just where I buy stuff. So anyway, just make sure you have all of the things that you need. And I've got this laid out here pretty okay. And I just want to say something about this fabric is that it's a jersey knit and it has a little bit of lycra in it. It's very lightweight. Sometimes you can see a little bit see-through depending on which way you're looking at it. So if you're using a lightweight fabric like this, just know that it's going to be a little bit more challenging for those of you who might be beginners or intermediate sewers. So if you buy a pure cotton, 100% cotton knit, it's going to be a little bit easier for you to work with. The other thing is I use these weights, and these are just washers that I pick up at the hardware store. And I'm not going to mention names because those are large corporate entities. So these are just washers, or you can use anything else that you would like. And then, of course, a rotary cutter. Now, I do say that this pattern requires a half yard of fabric. And let me just show you. I don't think I can get the whole thing in here. Let me just move these things around. Even though it says it's a half yard, because that's the length, the height of the fabric that you need. If you are buying real knit fabric, it's usually 58 to 60 inches wide, maybe a little bit less. Some are 54. If you work it, you see the edge up here. You probably could get 2 of these out of a yard of fabric, depending on the size that you're making and how you are at fabric manipulation. So just be aware of that. Okay, and I only fold over the amount that I need. So, and placing this on the fold. The other thing is when you're trying to lay out your knit fabrics, after you get them out the way that you want them laid out, you should actually let them rest for about a half hour, because what you're doing when you're manipulating that fabric is that you're stretching it out, and you don't want to cut a knit that is stretched out, because during sewing, or even if you wait to sew, it will shrink back to its original size. So make sure that you let it rest. And this has been resting overnight because I had this all set up, and I did not get started as early in the morning as I wanted to. So I'm laying this out. Make sure that you're getting everything cut. I had to just double check my edges. weight everything down. Do not forget to cut out your notches. I have two different notch styles. Okay. And then I'm going to speed up the cutting out because I think you're probably pretty good at cutting. If you're using scissors, just be really careful that when you put your scissor under here that you're not stretching the fabric too much because you could lose a little bit of width. All right, here we go. Okay, everything's cut out, just the one piece. Okay, I'm gonna take this off here. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and lay this out so you can see what the whole thing looks like. I'm gonna put the pattern over here, I guess, just really quickly. All right, now this is based on the slimline brief. I just kind of readjusted it for this style so it sits a little bit lower. Okay, so this is the center front. This is our little cutout dart, which we're going to actually sew that together. This is our leg area. And I know that this is kind of curved backwards, but actually this is the bottom of your rear, your buttocks. So this is actually about the center of your leg, and this is the back of your leg, and this is the front of your leg, and it stretches around, and this actually cups your buttocks. Okay, so that's why it looks like this. So I'm going to put this back the way I had it. That's just to show you the full piece. And then we're going to sew this lower center front dart. I'm going to try to be really careful not to stretch this out, but the table likes to hold on to it. Just get that matched up. Wrap like that, and I'm going to grab a couple of clips. Okay, so we're going to sew this. All of the seams, there are really only, well, 3 seams on this. One seam here, a seam here at the center front, and a seam here at the crotch here, which matches these 2 pieces together, and then the center back. So 1, 2, 3, and then the leg opening. And your seams here are going to be a 1/4 inch. And then here we're going to start with a 1/4 inch, and we're going to come back. And once you come back up to start coming back to the end of this, you're going to gradually come off of that. And then I'll show you how to deal with the tail of your serger or overlock. That's the same thing. It's just serger is a home machine, overlock is an industrial machine, but they do exactly the same thing. So here at this point, when you pull this off of the serger or overlock, do not cut your threads close. What I like to do is I like to have that the tail, and fold it over that seam allowance and just use the straight stitch machine and tack that down and then cut the excess tail off, and that keeps it from unraveling. Okay, so I'm going to go do that right now. I'm not going to stop and tell you that I'm doing the tail. I had a little bit too much coffee today. So the tail, so I will just do all that in one fell swoop. Not fell swoop, but I've got 2 machines. So overlock, and I'm using my industrial overlock because my other home serger is set up for something else, okay? So, but it's the same exact thing, okay? So I'll see you right back here after I get that done. All right, so we have this center front seam sewn, and we've got that little tail there tacked. I'm going to go ahead and cut this tail off because we don't need it. That's going to be sewn into the seam. Let's just kind of get this back here the way it was so you can see The whole piece. All right. So that's what we've got done so far. And I know I probably could have done all of these seams at once, but I want to just take you through the whole process. So let's actually have a look at what this looks like now. Okay, so there we've got our front. And everything is lined up here. Okay, now let me try this. Let's see. Let me look at the camera. Let me see if I can move this over just a little bit so we can get everything in so you can see what I'm about to do. Okay, so we've got everything. So now remember what I said about notches. Make sure you cut out your notches. So understand that this area here is the center backs. So for the bottoms, we need to actually sew this center back seam first before we can actually attach the crotch, which is here with the triangle notches. So this is the center back at the crotch, and this is the center back at the crotch. I'm going to take those two, and I'm going to put them together. Match those. Oh, I didn't bring any clips. So make sure you have all, I always do that. I always leave stuff at the sewing machine. So just going to clip those together. I'm going to go sew those quickly, really quick, and then we'll be back to do the other center back. I don't want to get ahead of everything, so we're just doing one seam at a time. Okay, so we have that seam sewn. Let's just show the back here. All right, so this seam is sewn. This is actually the crotch at the center back. And then we have the other back seam that we have yet to sew is the center back at the waist. And I know it looks like I want to sew this here. You could go ahead and do that. I want to do all the center back seams first, so I'm going to match the center back seams. And it doesn't, when you're matching, it doesn't have to be perfect, because I always usually just get these clipped together, and then I just kind of readjust things while I'm over at the machine. All right, so I'm going to sew that together. Okay, so we have the center back sewn. Let me just go ahead and turn this all out. So this is our center back seam. This is our at the waist, and this is our center back seam at the crotch. Now all we need to do is sew this crotch seam together and match up your seams. Now a lot of times what you want to do when you line up your center seams and a lot of sewing is make sure is try to fold the seam allowances, if they're not open seams, like this is not an open seam, to fold one way and the other way. A lot of times you do this, and when you get over to the overlock and you sew, one gets pushed to the same side. All right, so I didn't bring another clip, so I'm just going to reclip that when I'm over. I'm just going to work with it in the machine. All right, so we're going to sew that together, and then we'll almost have a suit, except for the elastics. Okay, so now all of our seams are done. You want me to flip it inside so you can see, face side out so you can see what it looks like? Okay, so we'll just look at this really quickly. Okay, so this is the front. All right. And then this is the back. So now all we need to do is we need to attach the elastics. And this is where you get to decide, what do you want to do first? Do you want to put the waistband on, which is pretty easy, or are you going to put the rear opening elastic on? And I think we're going to start with the rear elastic opening. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to divide this into fourths or sections, because we're going to actually make a circle, a ring, for the elastic, just like we do the waistband, and we're going to divide that into fourths, okay? So I have the two seams, so I'm going to go ahead and use that as one of the fourths. And of course, I already had this kind of done, but I just wanted to show you that. So I don't need to put pins there. And of course, I forgot my stick pins. So I'm going to now match those seams back up. And what I've got to do, gently match the seams, and just gently fold each of the sides of that opening until you get to the folded area of the fabric, just gently. And this is going to be your half of that half. Just put a pin there, and we're just marking this. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know how to do this already. So you could skip through this part. All right, so now I've got all my areas marked. 2 are with the seam, and the other 2 are with the pins. Okay, so I'm going to grab my piece of elastic, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I'm just showing you the elastics that I'm using, and I'm pointing out that the measurements are on the pattern for what needs to be cut. So it seemed to me it was a bit weird jumping from the last scene into this, that there wasn't any audio. So I've sped this up, so this is just me cutting out the different elastic pieces that are needed for this pattern. Piece of elastic here that I cut for the opening, and I'm going to sew this together in a ring. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll understand what I'm doing. But I'm going to mark the edges a 1/2 inch on both sides, both ends. Okay. And then I wrap this around and I stack those marks right on top of each other. And this is where I'm going to sew these together to make a ring. But before I do that, so I don't have to do double work, I'm just going to pin that together, and then I'm going to fold this on the pin and mark this end. And what I'm doing is I'm dividing it into fourths right now, and then I match that mark that I've done to that pin where I'm going to sew, and on both of each of the sides I'm going to mark. And so at least I'll have that done, and I can just actually match it up to my garment. All right, so that's done. I'm going to run over to the regular sewing machine, put this in there, and sew straight across that. Okay, so our ring is sewn together. I didn't have my snips over at the sewing machine, so that's why I'm having to do it here. I always take my snips with me. I try to leave them at the sewing machine, at all of my sewing machines, but somehow I take them with me. All right, so now let me go ahead and bring the suit in. And for this, we need to actually turn it face side out. But first, let's talk about the seam here. So where are we going to put the seam? If we put it here at the center back, then it's going to be really thick and heavy. And the same thing down here. And I know this is a V part, kind of a V, but we're going to work around that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put it at one of the sides over here. And at least that will eliminate some of the bulkiness here and here. All right, so that's what I'm going to do, but I'm going to attach this to the wrong side. Let me get this turned inside out so we can see this. And you'll probably need some pins. Pins are better than clips in this case. So let's find out where this is. So this is going to go about here. I can pick this up, okay. And I kind of like to pin in the direction of the sewing. My elastic is going to go on the bottom, so I'm just going to quickly pin this kind of at a diagonal so that it doesn't come undone. And as I'm going along here, because you're going to be stretching your elastic in when you're sewing, but I just like to pick this up and then go match all of my pins first, and then I'll go back and I might add more pins. But as I'm working with this, I want to make sure that the pins aren't going to come out. Okay, that's why I kind of pin at a diagonal. Okay, and then down here at the bottom, this is going to be tricky. And see, I have the seam going this way when I sewed it together, so I'm going to make sure that seam is going to go that same way once I sew. So get that marked, matched up to the seam. And when you're sewing this, so on this side, you see it's kind of a V. What you'll do is you'll just stretch and get that in there and match it to the edge of the fabric. And then we're going to end up turning it over anyway. Now, what you want to do, double check before you go over to the sewing machine. You want to double check to make sure that this isn't twisted that way. And I have done that before, and I've had to rip out all of the elastic. So now, see here on this edge, we're just going to stretch the elastic and it should meet the edge. Now, I put the elastic, I have a note on my overlock to put the elastic on the bottom, and then that actually helps me guide the top of this fabric, making sure that I'm matching the fabric with the edge of the elastic. The other thing you want to make sure is you're not stretching too much. You don't want to be stretching the fabric too much, otherwise it will just kind of ripple. Of course, when you wear it, it really won't look any different, but it will just kind of ripple a little bit. So I think I'm good on this. I don't think I want to put more pins. Of course, you could stretch like this and use your fingers, find the center, hold on to that, and then go ahead and put another pin, okay, like that. And I just remembered that I said I'm putting the elastic on the bottom, so I need to repin this for that, because all the pins are underneath. And of course, you want to be taking your pins out as you're sewing. So while I'm trying to do this, get this done, there isn't an attachment for your home serger. There's also one for an industrial serger, where it's an elastic attachment foot, and I will do a video for that. I don't know when I'll get that done. It doesn't always work, but it helps. Okay, now where am I? Here's the center back on the outside. Okay, so let's go attach this elastic with my overlock. All right, so we have the elastic sewn to the back opening, and now you can actually turn this over and zigzag this down if you want. I want to wait and do that until I have the leg openings done as well. And I'm not going to zigzag this time. I'm going to use the cover stitch, but I'm going to use my home cover stitch machine instead of my industrial. because I have 3 needles on my industrial and I only want to use 2 needles on this. So we're going to do the same thing with the leg openings, and you can see those better once I turn it to the front. So here, this is a leg opening, and we're going to divide this into fourths, just like we did with the back opening and as we do with the waistband. And so I'm just going to carefully do that. I have pins ready to go. Carefully match those edges, and it doesn't have to be, perfect. And I'm just going to do this for one of the leg openings for the video. Of course, you have to do it for both. So there's my mid point from the seam. I like to go from the seam. Okay, so now I've got that. So I'm going to match that pin down to the seam and then carefully match my edges to find the fourths or the quarter marks. Okay, that's good enough. All right, so that's the one on this. Now, once we've got this done, then we need to grab our elastic and do the same thing as we did for the back opening. Where is my... Get this done so you can see it. All right, so we're going to use this seam as one of the marks, and then I have 3 other pins. So divided that into fourths evenly. I'm going to grab one of my elastics, and again, mark each of the ends a 1/2 inch. We're going to stitch right across here. I'm not going to actually show myself doing that. You just saw me do that. So if you need a review of how to stitch this together, just go back and watch the stitching that I did for the rear opening elastic. So we're matching this up, and match this up, overlap it, match your marks on top of each other, and I'm just going to pin it together for you so you can see that. And then just stitch across this. Once I have that done, I'll come back here and we'll divide this into fourths. Okay, so I've got the leg opening ring sewn together, and I'm just going to divide this into fourths like I did before, and just also double check that you haven't gotten any twists in here. So I'm folding on that stitch line to find the opposite side, and I'm just going to mark with a pin. This is erasable, comes out with heat, although we don't really iron things, but it'll come off in the wash. All right, so I've matched that mark to my stitch area. Make sure there aren't any twists, and go ahead and mark, and then mark the other end. And now your leg opening ring is divided into fourths. Oh, my pin's getting away. All right, so now again, we have the issue of where to put this seam, this bulk. So you could put it up here at the side. You probably don't want it here in the area of the front pouch. You could put it up here, which is near your hip, or you could put it here at the bottom of the rear. And I think that's where I'm going to put this one. Of course, it doesn't matter. If you put it down here, in the crotch area, you just have a lot of thickness there that might be uncomfortable. So I'm actually going to start it here in the rear section. And I just kind of like to pin it quickly, and I pin this at a diagonal, and that's so it doesn't come out, and it's easier to kind of pin. You get a larger pinned area if you're going diagonal. And then I just match up all of the marks, and then of course you'll be stretching the elastic as you sew, and I'm going to be attaching this with my overlock machine. And I have a note on my overlock machine that tells me to put the elastic on the bottom. I think that's what works best. So I'm just going to get this all pinned, and then we'll have a look at what it looks like. Now when you get down here to the crotch area, um, decide which way you want to fold your seam allowance. I'm going to fold it toward the rear, and then I'm going to match up my mark. All right, so let me lay this out so you can see it. I've got that all pinned together. Now, remember, you're going to be stretching the elastic to match the size of the fabric a little bit, and you'll probably be stretching the fabric as well. And that's okay as long as you don't overstretch it. It will cause some it will just cause some rippling, because you're going to be sewing this again with the top stitch. So every time you sew on elastic, you're kind of weakening it. You're weakening that recoil. So just be aware of that. Also, I just want to mention, if my amounts for the elastic on the leg opening and the back opening seem too tight or too loose, you can always adjust that for your liking. Okay, so again, I'm just going to do one of these in the video, and then magically I'll have the other one done as well. I'm going to go ahead and get this stitched on with my overlock. Okay, so I have that one leg sewn on. Let's see if I can turn this out so you can see that. Oh, the other way. Okay, so this is the one leg opening that I have the elastic done on. And if you were paying attention, I did not remember to turn my pins going the right way for stitching on top, because I pinned everything on the elastic side. So just be careful of that when you're in your serger. And my industrial has a really nice pull on it, so it has a good pressure and pull. If your serger does not have that much pull, you may actually have to help it through the machine. So you may have to hold the elastic from both the back and the front while you're stretching, and kind of help it through your machine. Otherwise, you're going to be pulling it forward. It's going to be pulled forward because you're going to be stretching the elastic. Okay, so I'm going to go do this other leg, and I will be right back. Okay, so now all of our elastics are on as far as the leg opening and the rear opening, and so now we can actually flip these. So for the rear opening and the leg opening, I wanted to use a double needle cover stitch, and I'm going to be using my home cover stitch machine. It's a Janome Cover Pro 1000 CP, and I have it set for the double needle cover stitch. So I'm not using my industrial for this because I have my industrial set up for 3 needle, and that's what I'm going to use for the waistband. So all we need to do now is we're going to be turning the elastic to the inside, and we're going to have to stretch as we sew because it's, recoiled. So we're going to stretch as we sew to get it back. Try not to stretch too much, otherwise it will get a little bit ripply. So we're going to stretch this as we sew it down. Now, when you roll your elastic under to the underside, make sure that your fabric is flush with that edge of the elastic on the edge. You don't want any extra fabric over the edge because that just won't look pretty. So make sure that it's flush right on this edge here, okay? And that your needles, and if you feel with your fingers, the other edge of the elastic, that's about where you want your other needle to be. Your end needle should be at the end of the elastic, and the other needle should be in the elastic, so it's covering that edge. Okay, it's hard to see because we have overlocked this, all right? So now if you want to, you could pin this over, but the problem is that when you're in the machine, you're gonna have to manipulate this anyway as you go. So where to start? I usually like to start, let's see, this is, what am I doing? Let me find, what did I pin? I think this was the back opening. Let's turn this face side out. I like to start where the seam of the elastic is, or just before that. So where is the seam? The seam is that the seam? Yes, it is the seam. So if I take this and I turn that under, and then I'm gonna be having to sew this way, and got a little pokiness there. I might just trim that off before I get to the machine. And that'll be okay. And pin that. Okay. And this, what I'm talking about is this little ridge here that's caused because, which way in the camera can I see? This little ridge here that's caused because the elastic stuck out here, and it's okay if you just clip that off if that happens. I think I'm probably going to do that. But I'll keep this pinned over this way because that's where I'm going to start. I'm not going to worry about pinning everything else. I'm just going to do the back opening and the leg opening all at once. So I have the for the leg opening on one, I have the thickness of the seam there, and I've turned this over, and I can actually just go ahead and pin that there just to hold it in place if I want to. Okay, so let me lay this flat again for you. I'm going to go over to my cover stitch, and I'm going to cover stitch all of this under, all three of them, the two legs and the leg opening, and then we'll be ready to work with the waistband elastic. Okay, so we have all of the elastic cover stitched. This is the back. So let me turn this face side out so we can have a look at what that cover stitching looks like on the outside. Okay, come on. All right, this is the front. And our cover stitching looks pretty good. Now, just remember that if you feel that the suggestions for the elastic amounts that I give you are too tight or too loose, you can adjust those for your comfort. I would just do a ½ inch or inch at a time. Always do a test and to figure out where you are on the snugness of your elastic. So now I'm going to set this aside. We're going to work on the waistband elastic. So this is our piece. You just need to decide which side is going to be on the outside. And I like on this sport elastic, there's a ridgier side, I guess, and it does have ridges on it. There's a flatter side. I like that side to go to the body. So this will be my face side. So, and we will come back to that in a sec. I'm going to do something with this. You don't have to do this. This is just a finishing technique. I'm going to overlock each of these edges. If you choose to do that, that's just so it won't unravel, but I'm also going to stitch these down with a straight stitch. You could also, once you sew the seam, turn this over like that and then zigzag across this to hold everything in. I'm just going to straight stitch it. I'm just going to do a different method where I overlock these edges. I'm not going to put that on camera because I think you understand what overlocking is, but I'm not going to cut off the tails. And what I'm going to do, and you'll see me do this all in one, I'm going to put the face side together of the elastic. And I'm going to sew this together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then with the tails, what I'm going to do is before I sew, I'm going to put the tails across where I'm sewing. And I'm going to sew the tails right into that seam allowance. And then I will open this up. It will be sewn together, something like that, and then I'll stitch it down. Okay, so the tails of the overlocking will be sewn into the seam. All right, so I'm going to do all of that in camera without talking. Okay, so my audio decided to cut out in this scene, so I'm going to narrate over what I'm doing here. And so what I'm saying while I'm talking may not actually match my hand movements and everything that I'm doing. So for right here, I was just talking to you about the elastic waistband and how I finished the edges by overlocking. And then once I sewed the seam, actually while I was sewing the seam, I sewed the tails of the overlocking or serging into the seam that I was sewing, and then I trimmed them off. And then I turned them out, and then I top stitched the seam allowances of the elastic down. So now I'm going to use that seam. I should be folding the elastic onto the seam and explaining that I need to divide it into fourths, just like I've done on all of my other underwear and swimwear. So fold on that seam in half, and then you're going to mark. Of course, you could also use a pin to mark the halfway mark, and then match that mark back to the seam on the elastic, and then you'll need to mark each of the edges. And again, you can use straight pins if you want to mark that as well, that way as well. So now you need to do the same thing with the waist area of the garment. So I'm folding here at the center back seam gently all the way, fold it in half until you get to the center front. And then you'll need to mark that as well. And I'm going to do that with a pin. But of course, if you have chalk or something like that, or like I use the erasable pen on the elastic, you could do that as well. And then match that center front to the center back, and then carefully match the edges on either side, and then you'll need to mark or pin those as well. Okay, so everything is divided into fourths, both the garment and the waistband. And now you will need to match the waistband to the garment. And I like to start in the center back. So that seam on the elastic you'll need to match to the center back seam. And I will pin the bottom of the elastic to the garment instead of clips. So you can't really use clips. I suppose you could use clips, but I find that pinning it with a pin is much better. It holds on to things a lot better. So here I think I'm saying that if you want to sew this on like a regular seam, you're going to be adding to the height, so you may need to cut down the garment. And I know some people like to do that. So I'll do a different video about that later on to show you different variations of how you can install the waistband. But here I'm just pinning the elastic to the body, and I do 2 pins. I pin one at the lower edge of the elastic and then one at the top edge of the elastic, and what that does is it just holds onto the fabric from getting away from you while you're sewing the elastic on. So I'm just matching the elastic marks to the pin marks on the garment. And you'll notice if you've done any of my patterns before, made any of the other underwear, you will know that I pretty much match the elastic size to the garment size, and that is just so we're not overstretching anything, either the body garment or the elastic. And that's usually how it's done in the industry. When I say the industry, the fashion industry or the apparel industry anyway. So here I'm just showing you that I'm pinning the pins in the direction of the sewing. So what that means is that as I'm sewing the elastic to the garment, the head of the pin is right there. It's easy to remove. It will be not toward the sewing, but it will be away from the sewing. So it will be much easier to remove while I'm sewing. Here I'm just showing you that when you sew, you'll need to stretch a little bit. You shouldn't stretch too much, but just give it a little bit of a stretch while you're sewing the elastic on. That way that when you're pulling it on, you're actually stretching the elastic a little bit further just to get it onto your body, and then it won't stretch out. So here I'm telling you where to start. You want to start your stitching about, an inch or an inch and a half before the center seam, the center back seam. Stitch over it, and then when you go back all the way around, you're going to stitch over that, and then about an inch or inch and a half past the center back seam on the elastic, and that will lock all those stitches in there. So now I'm telling you, I'm going to go over to the cover stitch and get this started. Okay, so my audio went out on this scene as well. So basically, we're here at the end, and I'm just showing you that the cover stitching actually came out really nicely on both sides. And let me see, what am I going to do now? So if you notice some of the stitches look a little bit up and down, that's because the uh, stitches, when the needle goes in, may hit in various places of the knitted part of the elastic. It's not a skip stitch, it's just that that loop is actually pulling the stitch down. So now I'm about to cut the excess fabric away. And I know some people don't really care for that. You want actually just want to sew it into a seam. And I'll do that video, the comparison of different waistbands at a later date. So stay tuned. So I'm just going to trim all of this away. And I'm probably just saying just be really careful when you're stitching so that you don't actually cut some of the stitches. It helps a little if you pull just a little bit the fabric away. You'll see I'm doing that now. So pull away as you're cutting. Now I just finished cutting all the extra fabric off. Just cleaning up there a little bit. And I'll turn this face side out so we can see the finished product. And here is the front. And I guess I actually don't show you the back, but what I'm saying right here is that I will have my closing remarks coming up in the next scene. And so there you have it. If you stuck with me all the way through this video, thank you very much. I'm sure you've learned quite a few things along the way. I do want to mention that even though I put the elastic on the outside of this brief, in the instructions that you get with this pattern, it does explain that you can do the roll over waistband. If you're going to roll over the waistband to the inside, I would suggest using a shorter height elastic, such as 3/4 inch or 1 inch. But understand that when you do that, you're actually lowering the height of the brief. So if you want to roll the elastic to the inside, you might want to add a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch to the height of the basic pattern itself. So I hope that you enjoyed this and that you go and purchase this and enjoy making this and have a lot of fun at the parties that you might go to. With this, I've had a lot of requests for this style of brief, and so here it is. If you're looking for any other sewing patterns for underwear, please check out my website, sewitlikeaman.com. There you'll see a plethora of other sexy underwear and swimwear patterns. Thank you for watching, and always be well.